Hello, my name is Chang Sa. Welcome to the Alumni Affairs Digital Dialogue Series. For those of you who are not familiar with the program, let me just provide some details. You are watching a web chat sponsored by the U.S. Department of State. The Alumni Affairs Division in the Department of State serves as a resource for leaders like you around the world who have participated in an exchange program sponsored by the U.S. government. For example, maybe you have been on a program sponsored by the State Department, USAID, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Department of Energy, Open World. Any of these programs qualify you to be a member of our online community. Each year, the U.S. government enables thousands of current and emerging leaders to visit the United States. We do this because it is important for us to strengthen mutual understanding and cooperation between our countries. But here's a really important point. The exchange program that you were on is just the first step. It is the beginning of a long-term relationship for us with you. Why do we want a long-term connection with you? That's a good question. Because you are doing important things. And we want to help you do those important things even more effectively if we can be of assistance by providing resources and networks and connections. Here are 3 simple ways we can nurture this relationship together. The first is through the public affairs section of the U.S. Embassy or consulate in your country. You can contact the U.S. Embassy, get in touch with the public affairs section, just identify yourself as an alum and ask for information on alumni associations in your area and resources available to alumni. The second way to nurture a relationship between you and the U.S. government after your program is through the International Exchange Alumni website, which has over 100,000 members already, alumni all over the world that you can network with. People you probably run into at conferences. You may not know that they're alumni. Well, here on this website, you can find them and network with them. Lastly, there is always Facebook. So look for International Exchange Alumni on Facebook, or you can find the link on our website to our Facebook page. Why should you join our website? If you're not already members, among other things, the website, the International Exchange Alumni website, has a $33 billion, with a B, billion-dollar grants database with funding information from resources all around the world. And we will talk about this database today in the second half of our program today. The website, our website, also has an electronic library of your favorite newspapers and magazines, not just American ones, but international journals as well. Le Monde, Der Spiegel, New York Times. So the electronic library is available to all members of our website. And guess what? The library will read these articles to you. So you can listen to it during your morning commute. In fact, you can listen to it in 11 different languages. So without further ado, I want to introduce our first guest, Dr. Anita Plotinsky. Dr. Plotinsky is the principal of Anita Plotinsky Associates, which is a consulting practice. I want to tell you just a little bit about her so that this will inform the questions you ask her. We're really fortunate to have somebody of her background and experience with us today. Anita H. Plotinsky and Associates, they provide a wide range of services, from strategic planning to grant proposal writing for nonprofit organizations and institutions in Washington, D.C., the area here and across the country, really. Dr. Plotinsky also teaches courses in nonprofit leadership and management at the Washington Center, as well as a graduate course in grant proposal writing at the Elliott School of International Affairs at the George Washington University. She was director of the Foundation Center here in Washington, D.C., where she was responsible for information and development research services, outreach, educational programs, fundraising. So she has hands-on experience. She knows where you all are coming from. She has served as executive director of the Association for Research on Nonprofit Organizations and Voluntary Action, which is an international membership association dedicated to fostering the creation, dissemination, and application of knowledge about nonprofit organizations, philanthropy, civil society, volunteerism. She's also a graduate of Indiana University. She has her master's and PhD from the City University of New York. And we're lucky to have her with us. Dr. Plotinsky, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to have an opportunity to be with you today to explore the topic of writing strong and successful grant proposals. In considering writing strong grant proposals, it's useful to look at the question from the other side of the table, to look at it from the point of view of a funder, and to ask, what are funders looking for? You might ask yourself this question and see what answer comes to mind. Maybe it's using a particular kind of fancy font, or maybe it's including a lot of charts and grants. Sometimes people think that if they're involved in a wonderful project or a wonderful program, all they need to do is tell them what we do, and of course they'll want to fund it. But that's actually not quite the way it works. It's important to remember that every funder has its own philanthropic agenda, its own reason for existing, and they award grants to help their own institution fulfill its agenda. Let's get a little more specific now and look at some of the things that funders have said, funders have told us again and again that they are looking for. And these days, the number one criterion seems to be outcomes. An outcome is not an output. Those are different. We make a mistake when we tell funders about our outputs. An output might be, for example, holding a conference. That's not an outcome. The output is a conference. The outcome is that as a result of the conference, understanding was improved, and, for example, the practice of democracy was strengthened. Funders are looking for accountability, program accountability, and fiscal accountability. They are looking to fund organizations with a track record of success. They're looking to work with leaders they know and trust. New approaches are important. As a matter of fact, a number of years ago, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation issued a kind of white paper on what they and other funders were looking for. And they said specifically, we don't want to fund more of the same. We're looking for new approaches to difficult problems. And they also mentioned collaboration and sustainability. And we are going to be looking at each of those now in a little bit more detail. Let's look at outcomes first. So the question is, what outcomes do you want to achieve? And how will you know if you are achieving those outcomes? To that end, funders want to see in every proposal now an indication of how you plan to evaluate it. That could be a summative evaluation at the end. More likely, it will be a formative evaluation as you are going along. And to help you develop outcomes, it's sometimes useful to use a tool called a logic model. A logic model is just a fancy way of saying a certain kind of flow chart. And you can see samples of logic models online. If you just Google logic models, they're right there. There's also a very good tool for developing logic models on the Urban Institute's website. If you look for the Urban Institute's Outcome Indicators project, you will find sample logic models. And all a logic model is a series of boxes that begins with your inputs. Your inputs might be money and people. Moving to outputs, those are your activities and programs. Moving from there to your intermediate outcomes, and then finally to your end outcomes. That is how the world would be changed, how society would be changed, how things would be better as a result of the project that you are planning to do. Accountability. Funders want to work with partners whom they can count on to be accountable in the areas of both program and finance. That means they can be counted on to deliver the results that were promised in the proposal and to spend money the way it was shown in the budget, to spend funds wisely and appropriately. And that means they can count on you to keep records. And that is, by the way, very difficult to do when you are working in many different sites, multi-site projects, international sites. Sometimes it's very difficult to have people in locations who are keeping records of, first of all, what you are doing programmatically, and second, how you are spending funding. And they want to make sure that they can count on you to report back on those things, programs and funding, so that everyone can learn from them and successes can be replicated. Track record. Funders want to work with partners who have a track record of success in delivering programs in the desired area. There is also a preference for working with partners who have a track record of successful grant funding, of using grant funds successfully, and who have people associated with those projects who have the knowledge and experience that it takes to carry out these programs successfully. And that leads us to the next bullet, which is leadership. Leadership has two components. There's the board of directors or board of trustees, and there's the chief executive. It's important that your board of directors not be composed of 3 people who are close colleagues. Funders are looking for independent boards who can exercise their governance responsibility and assure accountability in all aspects, and who are exercising oversight of the programs, the organization, and the chief executive. They're also looking for a full-time paid chief executive as opposed to, say, a founder or an administrator. Sometimes we see wonderful new programs that were envisioned by a founder who hires an administrator to carry out his or her plans, but there is not an independent or separate, rather, executive director. We are looking for an experienced, knowledgeable, capable chief executive supervised and governed by a board of directors. What else are funders looking for? Funders are looking for new approaches. So it's helpful to look at your current programs and activities. What are you doing now? Which of your programs are most successful? Why are they important? And most of all, who exactly is benefiting? Funders always want to know who their funding will help. Are you helping women? Are you helping children? Are you helping people in indigenous communities? Are you helping minority groups in a particular location? That's important to consider and to communicate in your proposal. And then after you've looked at what you are doing now, the next step, of course, is what are some possible new programs and activities? Not only what might you do, but what can you do better than anyone else? What is your organization best equipped to do? And that requires knowing the field, knowing who else is working in your space, knowing the landscape in your field. When we are in this environment, we have to be experts not only in what we do, but also in the funding environment and the philanthropic landscape. And it's best if we not think in terms of competitors. It's best if we think in terms of collaborators. Funders don't like to see organizations competing with one another for scarce resources. They like to see organizations working together as power partners, because particularly nonprofits, in the nonprofit arena, it's sometimes difficult for us to accomplish our missions if we are working by ourselves. If we want to be successful, it's necessary to work with others. So we want to know who else is out there. Which organizations can we partner with successfully to advance our missions? And not only other nonprofits, that can be government agencies, it can even be for-profit businesses, and others. Whoever is in your fields. If you are in education, it might be schools, it might be libraries, it might be think tanks. Sometimes it's even religious institutions. It can be churches. Whoever can help advance the mission. And there is always a question in the back of every funder's mind, which is how your organization is going to keep this good work going after the project ends. And you don't necessarily have to have all the answers at the beginning, but I think it is important to communicate to a funder that you are aware that this is an issue, and that while you have their funding, you will use that window of time to explore other options, to explore other sources of funding, whether it's private, whether it's public or private. It could be individuals, it could be foundations, it could be corporations. And it's also important to demonstrate that you are currently on a sound financial footing. And I can hear some of you saying, if we had enough money, we wouldn't need this grant, right? But the way a funder sees it, they would like to give you support for an established, solid organization to do new things, different things, additional things. They don't want to provide funding to an organization that is in danger of going out of business a year or 2 or 3 down the line. They're looking for a basically solid organization. That will probably mean that you also have a diverse revenue mix, that you'll not be dependent on the U.S. government. You might have funding from a variety of governments, or even better, from some government sources as well as possibly foundations. You will have corporate partners. You might have contributions from individuals. And most important, particularly now, we're in an environment where earned income is increasingly critical. What is earned income? That is revenue that your organization generates yourself. If you are a university, that would be, of course, tuition. If you are an arts organization, that could be admissions or ticket revenue. Even social service agencies these days are being very creative in coming up with ways that they can support themselves in the long term and move toward sustainability. Now let's look at the grant proposal itself. And as Chang told you, I used to run the Foundation Center's Washington office. And the Foundation Center, wherever it works, begins its discussions of grant proposals always by saying the proposal doesn't stand alone, because it's not necessarily about the proposal. And you see 4 bullet points now, and if I had to rank the first 3, great proposals, great projects, and great organizations, I would rank them probably in a different order, probably in reverse order. Funders want to fund great organizations, strong, well-established organizations with a record of success. They want to fund exciting new projects. So if you are an established organization, you are going to be looking at new and exciting ways to do things, and to be sure to communicate that innovation and that excitement in your proposal. The proposal itself, of course you want it to be well written, of course you want it to be well organized, but I can tell you that it is not as important as being a strong organization with a great project. Personal connections, of course, are extremely important, and sometimes funding doesn't happen without the personal connections. So please look for every opportunity to establish relationships with funders, not only in government, but in the foundation community, in the corporate community, because you care about your mission, and if an institution or agency is funding in your area, they care about that mission too, and you will want to seek every opportunity to speak with them about how you can work together to advance that mission. That said, let's look at the proposal itself. First of all, formatting. Generally, funders expect 12-point type, Times Roman font, or something similar that's very easy to read. Use white space. What we want to avoid is blocks and blocks of text, paragraph after paragraph, that's frankly hard to read when a funder has been reading many of them. So break up your text with white space, break it up with charts and with graphs, and consider your audience. You may be an expert in your field. You may come to it from a particular discipline, such as law, such as social work, such as education. But when you write your proposal, remember that the person reading it may not be trained in your field, may not understand your specialized language. So we are writing for a general audience. Use keywords. Look at the request for proposals, if there is one, and by the way, if you are working in a foundation environment, most foundations do not issue requests for proposals. But they have statements of what they do and how they do it, and they issue a lot of material you can look at. but government agencies certainly do issue RFPs. And reflect that language back. If your mission and your programs are focused, for example, are helping underserved communities, but the RFP is looking to help people who are, say, economically disadvantaged, that's the language you want to use. Look for those keywords. And your narrative itself should be clear, concise, and compelling. And of those three, the most important is clarity. Avoid flowery language, avoid technical language. Make it clear so that no one has to read your page a second time to understand what you're trying to say. One development officer I heard about at a leading American public university said that she likes to pretend that the funder reading her proposal is reading it at 4:45 on a Friday afternoon. It's the 99th proposal she's read that week, and she's feeling tired, bored, and stressed. Your proposal has to be exciting enough and compelling enough to keep her reading. The narrative itself, these are the components. You begin with the need statement that answers the question, why are you submitting this proposal in the first place? What is the urgent need that you are addressing? And it's not sufficient to simply state that need. You want to back that up with quotes from authorities or statistics. Then you want to discuss your organization's capacity to meet that need and the people you have on board who are capable of leading the project successfully to meet that need. Most of your proposal, of course, will be the project description, which will discuss how you are going to do it. And it's useful sometimes to think of the journalist's questions. What, where, when, who, how, when will it take place? And you may wish to include a timeline to make it clearer. Where are your locations? How is the project going to happen exactly? And exactly who is going to do the work and how are they qualified? Of course, you will want to specify the amount of money that you will need. And as we mentioned back at the beginning, most important, what outcomes will be achieved? How will life be better for the group of people you are focused on? How will you evaluate the project to be certain that you are achieving those outcomes? And who will be helped? And then there is the budget. Very often people make the mistake of including simply a list of expenses. Let's remember that a budget has two sides. There is the income side and there is the expense side, and funders generally want to see both of those. So if you have income from other sources, be sure to include that. If it's other grants, if it's foundations, if it's earned incomes, if it's contributions from another government, whatever it is. And include your direct costs and your indirect costs. That's overhead. And often funders want to see not only your project budget, but the budget, the overall budget for the entire organization. Why do they want to see that? Why is that important? Because it provides assurance that you have your financial ducks in a row, that you have the resources to manage well any funds that are entrusted to you. It's also usually helpful to include a budget narrative that explains in words anything that might not be perfectly clear in the budget itself. how funds will be used, what the full-time equivalents are, why certain expenditures may be necessary, particularly if they're large, particularly if they are unusual. And then there are the attachments, which whose importance really should not be minimized. Generally, these will include your IRS determination letter if you are an American organization. That is your letter establishing that you are a tax-exempt organization and thus eligible for private funding, a tax-exempt organization. Funders are always looking for your most recent audited financial statements, very often your 990 as well. They want to see the detail of your financial management. And then your attachments will include biographical sketches of your project leadership, once again to determine that they have the knowledge and experience that is necessary to carry out your program successfully. If your organization is governed by a board of directors, by all means include that list with their names and affiliations to demonstrate that the people behind your organization are people who are known and respected and well qualified in your field. Include your program materials. Those can be your brochures, anything that your materials, that anything that tells the story of your organization, its mission, its programs. Another item to include is a list of current and former funders, because funders talk to one another, and this enables them to get in touch with someone who's funded you before to receive assurance that you are a good grantee, that you deliver results, and that they can count on you to be a good partner for their funding organization. So now I will turn it back over to Chang. I understand there's another speaker, and then later I will be very happy to try to answer your questions. Chang, I am not hearing you.
Oh, okay. Can others hear me on screen?
I am hearing you now.
Okay, good, good. Thank you, Dr. Plotinsky. I was just saying we were busy chatting away as you were speaking and asking questions, and I think we have a number of good questions. However, we're going to segue right to our next speaker and then come back to you, both of you, with the questions and answers session. Would that be all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. We have joining us Sharon Dick, our second speaker today, and she represents a company called ProQuest. We mentioned earlier in the program that the alumni website has a $33 billion grants database. That database is called the COS Opportunities Database, and it is provided by Sharon's company, ProQuest. Ms. Palchik is a customer education and training specialist. She is based in Pennsylvania and has been providing instructions since 2005. She obtained her master's in library and information science from the University of Pittsburgh. And she is here to demonstrate how to use the COS Opportunities Database. She's going to show you sort of the shortened version of it today, because we actually have, on July 11th, we have another representative from Sharon's organization, perhaps Sharon herself, coming back as the primary guest for our next web chat on July 11th. But we did want to provide sort of a teaser. You know how movies have a little teaser, a trailer? Well, this is it. We want to get you excited about our next web chat. So Sharon, take it away.
Great, thank you. If you could confirm that audio is working on my end as well, I will continue on. All right, I see a big thumbs up. Thanks for having me. So we are going to talk briefly about COS funding opportunities, which is a pretty exciting resource. Building on what Anita has talked about today, once you have your, no doubt, amazing proposals together, how do you figure out where you're going to submit them? You are likely aware of funding opportunities in your region or in your disciplines or places that you could, the big names perhaps, submit your content. But if you really want to expand your horizons, see where additional monies are available, COS funding opportunities is one of the most comprehensive global databases with funding information. So I'm going to show you a live demo. This is a resource you have access to, and again, leading up to the next session, if I forget to say it at the end, it's definitely a resource I encourage you to go in and play around with, do some searches, see what sort of questions you have, see what sort of opportunities you find. So, allow me to share my screen here. Now, I do believe there's an option to make it a full screen share. You might see that on your end, or if there is something that I should do, let me know that. But this basically is what you will see. It's a nice, friendly start page for researching funding opportunities. When you come in, you have a single search box. You can also come over, though, to the advanced search as well. And in here, you have a search builder form and a variety of additional search options that can really help you focus on finding relevant funding opportunities. So again, as Chang said, there's information on over $33 billion worth of grants, fellowships, awards, and more within this database. And it really is international in both content and the audience that it's reaching out to. You'll find monies from public as well as private sector sponsors from around the world. One other thing you might be thinking, a lot of this information is freely available online, and that is certainly true. Some of the content that we have in here is freely available online, but it's not aggregated into a single portal that you can search. This is what COS funding opportunities does. And it takes it a step further. Our editors add indexing so that additional information about whether this funding opportunity may be relevant to your work or the work of your organization, it really helps you drill down. There are filters, there are search options, and basically you can search a very large collection of information while still finding more precisely the opportunities relevant to you. So enough talk. Let's take a quick look. From the basic search page, you can enter any terms. If I have a tip for you today, in some databases, research environments, you want to start very specific. In funding opportunities, you can do that. But the way the proposals often are, they talk about broad categories that are of interest to them in terms of subjects. So you may want to, if your project is very specific and has terms, absolutely search on those. But you may want to go broad as well and see, is there what sort of opportunities there are in terms of education or environmental issues or science and childhood education, things like that. If I just run a simple search here for education, not surprisingly, you're going to see over 10,000 results. Each of these has a nice preview option, so as you're going through, you don't actually have to drill into each of them before you see the information that's available. If you want to get more specific, you can add additional terminology here in your search box. You can choose to sort your results by relevance, which is the default, But you can also sort by deadline. So if you want to find the ones that are due sooner rather than later, you can sort earliest first or even latest first. You can filter by sponsor type. Maybe you're specifically looking for private foundation funding, or you want to investigate further government funding but non-US government funding. There are filters that are at play here. And this is where the indexing that our editors have done really helps you work through this large collection of information. So let's say I did filter to private foundation. I also have a filter for funding type. So here I could narrow to funding specifically for programs or curriculum development. Or I could filter to training or scholarship or fellowship information. Research, prizes or awards. There are also filters in terms of requirements and subject. Each opportunity that is available in here, let's click into one. Each opportunity is assigned a variety of keywords or subject terms to help illustrate what this funding is really about. And additionally, you'll typically see a more detailed description. Your terms are going to be highlighted in yellow. And scrolling down, you'll see any additional information we have. Some records are more robust than others. Many include links to find more information. So if I did want to take a closer look at this particular institution that's providing this funding, I could click on the link and it would take me out to their website. So likely you have specifics in mind, perhaps a minimum funding amount that you would need. Oftentimes too, where the activity will take place. That is sometimes a restriction or a requirement that you need to note in advance. Also, citizenship. Some say you need to be a citizen of Australia in order to have this funding. Good news. You can set all of those parameters up in the advanced search in advance. So scrolling in here, if I came to funding amount, I could say minimum, I want, let's say, $10,000. In terms of activity location, if I needed it to be, it could take place anywhere, or perhaps take place, I can choose to select unrestricted or unspecified. And then I could select where I live or where the project will take place. Is it the United States? Is it Europe, Africa? The list is quite long, so you can go through and check off the options that would apply. Same thing with citizenship. Typically what I would suggest is checking off unrestricted and unspecified. Unrestricted means the sponsor has stated that the field does not have any restrictions attached to it. Unspecified simply means that no specific information is designated in this front. And then I would check off my own citizenship or the citizenship of those who will be working on the project. You can also specify in advance any requirements, funding type, sponsor type. You also have the subject lookup. So maybe education was a little broad. If you come into the subject lookup and look at the keywords that are at play, let's search for education in here, you're going to see the keywords that have been assigned to different grants that include the term education. So maybe agriculture education is more appropriate, or art education, or arts education, bilingual education. These can be some subject terms that help you, again, more precisely search for the information that's relevant. You can also, of course, add in your own terms. So let's clear this form here and say, I'm specifically interested in education for girls or women. Let's leave that $10,000 minimum in there. And I'm going to include unspecified amounts too. And for activity location, I will select unrestricted and unspecified and run a search. And so now I have just an under 100 opportunities that I could explore. So all in all, this is a resource that I do recommend checking out. It no doubt will bring to light some opportunities that you may not be aware of, or some new ones that have been added more recently. Our editors update this database regularly with new content and remove older records as well. And it certainly is a great source to check when you are looking for funding for the projects that you're working on and that your institution is working on. So at this point, I'll go ahead and stop sharing here. And come back, and I'll turn it back over to Chang.
Okay.
There we go. We hear you now.
Okay, good. Well, we appreciate that introduction, that teaser for our July 11th web chat on the COS Opportunities Database. Lots of questions and interest there again in the chat roll. I don't know if you were watching, but we want to go right to the questions and answers now in the remaining 10 minutes. Let's see. I will ask the questions on behalf of the alumni. Chamara asks, one moment. Okay. Can I search by country for specific funding? So this is a question for Sharon. In the COS Opportunities Database, can a person search for funding information by country?
Yes. There's limiters there are a couple limiters that would be appropriate, and on the advanced search, let me just check to see what that field is so I tell you correctly. There is the citizenship option that is oftentimes really is that country limiter, and there is the activity location, which is also a country limiter. So there are two aspects when we talk about countries that I would say you can use in terms of the options that are there.
Okay, so it is possible to filter by countries. And the second question is for Anita. Anita, we have Marana asking, is collaboration more co-creation of values, or is it finding competitive advantages?
I'm not sure I understand the question here, but if I am, I think what it really is about is finding partners who can help you accomplish your mission and accomplish your goals, whoever they may be. It's not about competitive advantage. It's about finding the people who can work together, who all care about the same cause, who can work together to make it successful.
So if I understood that correctly, because there was some chat on that when you were talking on that part, Anita, and so if I understand correctly, what you're saying is when people are thinking of applying for funding or putting together a proposal and they look around their environment, there might be other organizations or individuals who are in the same field, perhaps looking for the same sources, same types of funding. And
That's
rather
right.
than look at them as competitors, you're saying look at the possibility of maybe collaborating with them as partners?
That's right. That is a possibility. But there's even more to it than that. Ideally, we will have looked at the landscape before we apply for a proposal. Ideally, we will know who else is working in our field. We go to conferences with them, we develop relationships with them, we look for opportunities to work with them, not only to increase our chances of getting funding, which is important, but work with them on many levels to work together to make great things happen, the things that our organizations care about together.
This next question is also for Anita from Madine. Madine asks, Dr. Plotinsky mentioned that well-established organizations are preferred by funders, ones with track records, board of directors, etc. But what tips do you have, Anita, for new organizations?
Well, I think I would have two tips. The first tip, by the way, my screen just kind of got dark. I hope this isn't happening to others.
Yeah,
the first tip, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The first tip is to partner with more established organizations. This goes back to the collaboration theme. To partner with an organization that has a successful track record of programmatic accomplishment and funding, delivery of funded programs, and to work with them. And the second tip would be to engage as a leader, someone who has a successful track record for other organizations. So even though your organization may be new, the leader is someone they know and trust and feel comfortable working with.
So a strong leadership, then, is what you want to demonstrate if you have a new organization.
Strong leadership, experienced leadership, and known and trusted leadership. Someone the funders have worked with before.
Good. This next question, Owen asks, any recommendations for computer, this is for you, Anita, I think, or perhaps for both of you, any recommendations for computer programs that are good for making professional-looking proposals, so that they can send these proposals as a standalone document? Are there any good ones that are free? So good ones that are free.
There are a lot of companies that would like you to pay a lot of money to buy their proposal document software. You don't need to do that. Millions and billions and gazillions of dollars is awarded every year to proposals created using Microsoft Word or something similar. That's really all you need. And as I said earlier, it's not about the great proposal, it's about the great idea and about the great organization.
Great. Another question. You had talked about the importance of connections, Anita, and networks. And Dauda asks, what types of organizations should we reach out to and form connections with? And when you talk about connections, are these connections sort of internal connections or external connections for our organizations?
They're external connections. Whether what you do is education or health or building democracy, there are certainly conferences in your field. There are journals in your field. There are authors of important papers. Read their papers, go to the conferences, get to know people in your field to build your networks, whether they are also grantee organizations or whether they are funding organizations. Once again, getting the grant is not the end, it is the means to the end. The end is making life better for people. It is accomplishing your mission. So the answer is going to be different for every organization. Who are the people working in your field who are successful, who can help you, whom you can help to work together to accomplish your goals?
We have an interesting question, Anita, from Anis Mabruk, and we got some clarification. She is asking typically when an organization gets a grant from a foundation or from benefactors, typically do they get the money up front, or does the source of funding like to control it until the project has reached its outcomes, desired outcomes?
That depends. Many government grants are dispersed as the money is spent. Foundation grants are often dispersed at the beginning of every year or sometimes at the beginning of every half year. It really depends on the funder. I think what you want to do is have a plan for spending the money as you deliver the program, and your budget should make clear how you plan to do that.
So in your budget, make it clear how you plan to spend the money. That's a factor in this.
That's
Thanks,
right.
Anita. We have a question from Anna Duran. Anita mentioned earlier an urban, quote-unquote, urban website. Could you elaborate on this?
Absolutely. This is the website of the Urban Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C. It has many programs, many projects, but one of its projects is their Outcomes Indicators project. So if you simply Google Urban Outcomes, you're likely to get it, or Urban Institute Outcomes, and you will get their Outcome Indicators project.
Okay, I just typed it into our chat roll for everyone listening. Outcomes Indicators project.
Of the Urban Institute. Absolutely, that's it.
Thank you. And that's where you can learn more about outcome versus output and some of those things that you mentioned earlier.
Right, it's a great resource.
All right. Thanks, Chamara. She just put up the URL for the urban.org.
Great.
See, I think we're just about wrapping up. It's 9:29. I do want to thank our guest speakers, Anita, Sharon. Sharon, by the way, is stepping in at the very last minute for her colleague who could not join us. So, Sharon, thank you. And we look forward to the July 11th program, when we will devote an entire hour to training our alumni on the use of the COS Opportunities Database, so that they could pick off some of those $33 billion. What do you think?
I think that sounds like a great plan.
Yeah. And just as a heads up to our alumni as well, thank you for joining